On October 14, 1943, 291 American bombers took off from bases in England and headed deep into Germany. Their target was Schweinfurt, a city that produced 60% of Germany's ball bearings. Destroy the factories there, and German military production would suffer a major blow. The Luftwaffe was waiting for them. What followed was one of the bloodiest days in the history of American air power. 60 bombers were lost. 600 men were killed or captured. Hundreds of aircraft limped home with dead engines, shattered cockpits, and wounded crews. And yet, the mission was flown, and 2 weeks later, the Americans went back. The aircraft that made those missions possible, that flew through flak so thick veterans said you could walk on it, through fighter attacks that would have ended any lesser machine, was the Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress. This is its story.
Another world, sky.
In 1934, the United States Army Air Corps issued a competition for a new multi-engine bomber. The requirement was modest: a twin-engine aircraft capable of carrying a bomb load of 2,000 pounds at a speed of 200 miles per hour. Boeing ignored the modest part. What Boeing's engineers designed instead was a four-engine aircraft, larger, heavier, faster, and more capable than anything the competition was offering. They called it the Model 299. On August 16, 1935, the Model 299 rolled out of Boeing's factory in Seattle. A reporter standing on the tarmac looked at the bristling machine gun turrets covering every angle of the aircraft and called it a flying fortress. The name stuck. The Army was impressed, but cautious. The aircraft was more expensive than the competition. And on October 30th, 1935, the prototype crashed during a test flight when the crew forgot to release a gust lock on the control surfaces. The aircraft was destroyed before the Army had officially ordered it. Boeing pressed on. They refined the design. By 1938, the Army began placing orders. By December 7th, 1941, the day Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, the B-17 was already in service, though in small numbers. The war that was about to begin would demand it in thousands. Flying a B-17 on a combat mission over Europe was one of the most dangerous jobs of World War II. The statistics were stark. In 1943, at the height of the air war over Germany, a bomber crewman had a worse chance of surviving his required 25 missions than an infantry soldier had of surviving the entire war. The crews were young. Bomber pilots averaged 22 years old. Gunners were often younger. They came from farms in Iowa, cities in New York, small towns across a country that had never experienced anything like what they were about to face. At 25,000 feet over Germany in winter, the temperature inside the aircraft reached 40 degrees below zero. The crew wore electrically heated suits, but if the heating system failed, frostbite set in within minutes. Oxygen masks were required above 10,000 feet. If a mask failed or was shot away, unconsciousness followed within seconds. And through all of it, the cold, the oxygen, the mechanical complexity, the crew had to function, had to man their guns, had to hold formation, had to stay in the fight, because leaving formation meant death. A single B-17 that fell behind or broke away was immediately swarmed by German fighters. The only protection the bombers had was each other, the overlapping fields of fire from dozens of aircraft flying in tight formation, their machine guns covering every angle of approach. They called it the combat box, a precisely calculated three-dimensional formation designed to make attacks from almost any direction extremely dangerous, forcing enemy fighters to fly through overlapping fields of .50 caliber fire. It worked when the formations held. Before we continue, let's take a closer look at the aircraft at the center of this story. The Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress, the most famous bomber of World War II. Role: heavy strategic bomber, built to fly deep into enemy territory, deliver its payload, and bring its crew home. Wingspan: 103 feet, 9 inches. Length: 74 feet 4 inches. 4 right are 1820 Cyclone engines, one of the most reliable power plants of the war. Maximum speed, 287 miles per hour. Service ceiling, 35,600 feet, an altitude that challenged many enemy interceptors and reduced the effectiveness of some anti-aircraft defenses. Range, 2,000 miles. Bomb load, up to 17,600 pounds, though typical combat loads were closer to 6,000 pounds when flying maximum range missions. Defensive armament, up to 13.50 caliber machine guns, manned by 10 men, pilot, co-pilot, navigator, bombardier, radio operator, and 5 gunners. Over 12,700 B-17s were built between 1936 and 1945. More than 4,700 were lost in combat. Fortress by name, fortress by nature. Now, let's get back to our story. The B-17 became legendary for one reason above all others. It could take punishment that would have destroyed many other aircraft and still bring its crew home. The stories are almost unbelievable, except that they are documented, photographed, and verified. A B-17 named All-American was struck by a German fighter that cut off most of its tail section in a mid-air collision. The rear of the fuselage was hanging by a few metal stringers, swaying in the slipstream. The tail gunner was isolated from the rest of the crew, with nothing but open sky where the fuselage had been. The aircraft flew for 90 minutes in that condition and landed safely at its base in North Africa. No crew member was killed. Another B-17 returned to England with an engine on fire, a second engine dead, most of its control surfaces shot away, and its hydraulic system destroyed, meaning no brakes and no flaps for landing. The pilot put it down on the runway anyway. The crew walked away. Photographs from the period show B-17s missing entire sections of tail, with gaping holes through the fuselage wide enough to walk through, with engines hanging by their mounts, with noses completely shot away, and yet airborne, yet flying, yet bringing their crews home. The aircraft design was part of the reason. The B-17 was massively overbuilt by the standards of the time. Its airframe could absorb damage that would structurally fail a lighter aircraft. The 4 engines meant it could often continue flying after losing 1, and sometimes even 2, allowing it to reach friendly territory despite severe damage. But the other reason was the men who flew it. Pilots who kept aircraft in the air through sheer refusal to let them fall. Co-pilots who took the controls when pilots were hit. Crew members who held torn hydraulic lines together with their hands. Who plugged holes with their clothing. Who operated their guns with frostbitten fingers and kept flying. Some German pilots reportedly referred to the B-17 as the 4-engine fighter. It was a nickname born out of respect for the bomber's remarkable defensive firepower and ability to survive battle damage. Of the thousands of B-17s that flew over Europe, one became the most famous of all. The Memphis Belle, named by her pilot, Captain Robert Morgan, after his girlfriend back home in Memphis, Tennessee, was the first B-17 in the European theater to complete 25 combat missions with her original crew intact. 25 missions. No crew member killed. No crew member captured. In May 1943, the Memphis Belle and her crew were brought home to the United States for a war bond tour. They were heroes, living proof that it was possible to survive, to complete your missions, and come home. For a country desperate for good news from the skies over Europe, the Memphis Belle was exactly that. The aircraft survived the war. The crew survived the war. In the years that followed, the B-17 gradually disappeared from service. The jet age made it obsolete. The 4-engine heavy bomber of World War II had no place in a world of jet fighters and nuclear weapons. Of the more than 12,700 B-17s built, only a handful remain airworthy today. But the aircraft left a legacy that cannot be measured in production numbers or combat statistics. The strategic bombing campaign that the B-17 helped make possible, flawed, costly, and still fiercely debated by historians, played a major role in destroying the Luftwaffe's ability to defend German airspace, crippling German war production, and forcing Germany to divert enormous resources to air defense that could have been used on the Eastern Front. When Allied troops landed on the beaches of Normandy on June 6, 1944, they did so under skies that the B-17 had helped clear. The soldiers on those beaches looked up and saw American aircraft. That was not an accident. That was the B-17. In the skies over Europe between 1942 and 1945, the Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress flew more than 290,000 combat sorties. It dropped more than 640,000 tons of bombs on German industry, infrastructure, and military targets. It was hit by flak. It was attacked by fighters. It was frozen, starved of oxygen, and pushed beyond every limit its designers had imagined. And it kept flying. The men who flew it, 22 years old, dressed in electrically heated suits, manning .50 caliber guns at 25,000 feet in 40 below cold, are mostly gone now. But what they did in those aircraft, in those formations, on those missions over Germany, helped end the most destructive war in human history. The B-17 was not just a bomber. It was the machine that gave those men a fighting chance. And most of the time, not always, but most of the time, it brought them home. If you'd like to support this project, the link is in the description below. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one. We'll see you on the next flight.